Good afternoon and welcome to our conversation on LTE license and coexistence with Wi-Fi. And today we're talking to Jim Miller, the Director of Radio Standards at InterDigital. Jim, welcome and thanks for talking to us today.
Yes, thank you for having me to discuss this important topic.
Excellent. Can you tell us what is that you do at InterDigital, first of all?
Yeah, I coordinate all of our 3GPP RAN activities and heavily involved even in our IEEE 802 activities and trying to get a coherent strategy forth on all of our radio work in both IEEE and 3GPP.
Well, that's excellent because you're seeing both the Wi-Fi side and the LTE license side, so you have a very good view on both of them. And can you also tell me what is that the role of InterDigital? You've been involved in both the Wi-Fi and the LTE side, so what's special there?
Well, what we try to do is take a technology almost agnostic position because we feel that since unlicensed spectrum is there, Wi-Fi is free to use it. However, we want LA to use it fairly. Otherwise it won't be fair to Wi-Fi, and we'll actually put it into a niche market. It can only be used in certain spectrum where Wi-Fi isn't, and that would not be good for it and would make it, a very fringe thing that we wouldn't necessarily need to be further involved in. So we're working strongly in that direction to progress both on the Wi-Fi side and the LA side for some cooperation, and in particular on the LA side, making sure it's defined so it treats Wi-Fi and anything else in the spectrum fairly.
Yeah, and there has been a lot of debate back and forth, and a lot of changes actually over the last year or so in terms of the evolution of the role of LTE unlicensed and Wi-Fi and how they coexist. Can you provide a little bit of a background in terms of how you see things developing? How are we moving forward?
Okay, well, I'll just start briefly at the beginning. Well, the beginning of this, when it came into the picture and the 3GPP side, that occurred last December with some initial proposals. Those proposals, though we were interested in the topic, we could not support at that time because it was not addressing fairness, et cetera. It was more or less trying to put Wi-Fi in one of the spectrum blocks that was still to be allocated. So it took basically, we were not alone in that aspect. So it kind of took LLA evolving over the next 9 to 12 months before it was presentable, agreeable to everybody in 3GPP to go forward, and fairness was a large part of that and a large addition to it.
Yeah, and so, but how do you define fairness and nice? Those are very nice, well, they're very sort of appealing and attractive terms, but they're not trivial to define, isn't it?
No, that's going to be the sticking point going forward once we come to a solution on the LTE side, and coming to that solution is to define fairness. We define fairness as an LA node being brought into an existing system would not cause any more interference or degradation to a Wi-Fi cell than adding another Wi-Fi cell. Because right now, anybody can come in and add a Wi-Fi cell anywhere. That's part of the appeal of Wi-Fi to begin with. So there's no reason why an LA cell couldn't go in there and have the same basic effect to the Wi-Fi cell. And that's what we're striving to get towards. In certain environments, that's easier to find than others.
Yeah, and that's a nice way to sort of set the ground, like, equal opportunity, equal role for both. But do you think that in terms of the regulation, is the regulation good enough or sufficient to ensure this kind of coexistence?
I think, well, yeah, that's some of the interesting part. We also at InterDigital look at all of the regulations worldwide. For instance, dynamic frequency, DFS, dynamic frequency requirements here in the U.S. Listen before talk in Europe and other places, and the various power control requirements. They're all different. All the target 5 gigahertz spectrum is splintered, and different things are there. Radar exists in some of the blocks, etc. We were looking for a solution that will be a superset of all those. So we didn't have a particular solution that would work, for instance, in certain bands in the U.S. and not other bands in the U.S., or not be allowed in Europe, or need some additional work to work in Europe. Different features. We wanted basically a worldwide standard that could be deployed in any unlicensed spectrum. So the initial targets, of course, and the initial studies are in the 5 gigahertz range.
So basically, you need to have a solution that meets the requirement of all the regulations in the major countries worldwide, so that you can have a global product. So do you think that that's achievable?
I think it's pretty achievable. The fairness thing is going to probably be the biggest sticking point, because there are varying views on that. But I see there's a great deal of similarity, and fundamentally the issue is the same. For LA to be deployed in an area, and for example, bring down somebody's home Wi-Fi, or a company's Wi-Fi, or a conference center's Wi-Fi, based on conflicts or hogging the spectrum, is going to attract attention, and thus bring the regulators in as a final. At the very least, that's when they're going to get involved. I would anticipate that we will be able to have an industry consensus on this. Hopefully get to a point where the number of issues in front of regulators are small, and they can rule in those particular areas, because neither side. I've talked to people on both sides. Neither side is interested in having a big fist fight in front of the regulators. So the whole idea is let's define this, and get some initial indications of how each side feels about it, try to come to some consensus, and then bring it out to the regulators, and potentially hopefully get to a point where they're answering a small number of questions, and to handle a small number of cases, and thus be able to be not have to put in their the referee perspective of saying you can't be here, or you can be here, and that type of thing, because that we've had that in the past with, for instance, in the 3GP world, with satellite conflicts with particular spectrum and such. It gets very messy. So that's something that everybody I work with on both on the LTE side and the Wi-Fi side wants to avoid. Even though they're in position to possibly have a good argument, it's the court of last resort, and we want to try to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that it's emerging in the last few months, that no matter where the operators and the vendors are coming from, it's really crucial to ensure good coexistence with Wi-Fi. Otherwise, LTE license is going to have trouble to succeed. And so everybody is willing to cooperate, and I think that's maybe I can get your view on that. This collaboration within the industry that comes even before the standardization and before the regulation is crucial to the success. This is sort of the foundation for the standardization efforts, right?
Yes, in our perspective, definitely. We are pushing strongly to have everybody involved, and have an open discussion in an open forum as much as possible. Because right now the discussions go on both in Wi-Fi and 3G in separate meetings, as such, and while there's company overlap and company positions, and they get carried over to each of the paradigms. Some of the 3G positions by some of the bigger companies show up as their Wi-Fi positions. Every company has some strategy here on this. It is a fight a strong discussion that's going on in both realms, using some different perspective, because the Wi-Fi world is different than the LTE world. You know, the working continuously in the unlicensed spectrum versus working in licensed spectrum. Two different viewpoints and two different ways of looking at the world, and two different ways of even doing simulations and simulating things. So the whole point of the effort right now, and what we're trying to contribute to, is to get the 3G, for instance, the 3G models of the channels, et cetera, to a point where we can judge fairness for both Wi-Fi and LTE, because there's certain aspects people could point to that Wi-Fi could cause more damage to LTE than the other way around, and vice versa. LTE has the potential, if the fairness algorithm wasn't written correctly, it could take over the whole band. Mm-hmm. So we're working that battle from both ends to try to get to a point where we have a system that we can get some intergroup agreement on as being relatively fair, but there may still be some sticking points that we may have to get some regulatory input on. But we hope those are that's necessary. We hope it's minimal, as opposed to saying, here's the whole mess and throw it in the regulator's lap.
So there is a lot of work being done, and hopefully in the next few months we'll get to a good standardization approach that satisfies the industry. Now the question though is, at that point, is how do we make sure that whatever the standard is going to be followed in practice? So for instance, for Wi-Fi, you do have a certification program, and that ensures coexistence of different Wi-Fi networks with each other. But here we have a different problem. It's a different level, because you have Wi-Fi and LTE, and you need to make sure that they both follow the specs, mm-hmm. and that the outcome it's good. And right now there is no way to actually ensure that. Do we need to, or we don't even need to do that? How can we know that the products out there actually are respecting the standards? Well,
yes, that comes into play, and that will be a further discussion. But we anticipate that LTE terminals go through rigorous conformance testing also. In fact, one could argue it's even stronger than the Wi-Fi one, because it's normally used in licensed networks. But it's at the very least on par with it. And the whole point, the whole struggle, once it's defined, will be defining ways of being able to test the terminal, so it is not transmitting in when it's not supposed to be, and it's acting like it should be, so it does not interrupt the Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you work with a lot of mobile operators, obviously, and I'm sure this is a topic that comes up all the time these days. What are you hearing from the operators? What are they seeing there?
Actually, the operators do it. There's a large range of inputs from them. The issue is right now Wi-Fi is used as an offload perspective to offload traffic. A lot of operators have their own separate Wi-Fi networks, or somewhat interrelated, where if you subscribe to pick a carrier, you can get on their Wi-Fi also. The same thing that cable companies have. They have their own Wi-Fi, and if you use their internet, you can use their Wi-Fi. And there are ways that the operators can use to do offload right now. The problem is the Wi-Fi operation system is completely separate from the 3G one, so it requires a whole different set of tools for operations and maintenance, etc. And the other bad part about it is right now it requires the control of offload is more in the terminal, not in the network. So the operator has a little less control over that. We at InterDigital have, with the operators, several operators have been looking at our Smart Access Manager product, which is a UE-based application that will allow the selection of the best one to provide the best quality of service for particular users. But this is still outside of the realm of the normal mobile operator, where they can manipulate how their spectrum and how they allocate it to users from the network side. So this is built on top of it, and it's a little more awkward, and thus LOA will bring that spectrum to be treated the same as the license spectrum already is, and controlled somewhat from the network side, giving a better guarantee of quality of service than the offload, because there's been obvious things that people have when they go to Wi-Fi because a good Wi-Fi signal is there, that particular Wi-Fi is congested, and thus they get worse service than if they stayed on their even 3G or LTE system. So there are various operators that have existing Wi-Fi, so they're moving at a different speed than some of the other operators that just want to utilize this spectrum and deploy it separately, because ones that already have existing Wi-Fi, large Wi-Fi deployments right now aren't necessarily looking to run out and replace those with LOA and build. For instance, right now, the current version of LOA involves all the single scheduling from the macro, the LTE station. So the Wi-Fi is part of the macro. It's connected directly with the macro with no real latency. So it's either co-located or very short distances away. That could be controlled at a more or less what's called no latency backhaul.
Yeah.
So scheduling can be done at a single location, which is the macro at the LTE at the LTE side.
So this is quite interesting, because what LTE Unlicensed does for an operator is to allow to bring more of a control from a network side in the unlicensed and licensed band together. So there is much better integration. But at the same time, there is a lot of work being done also on the Wi-Fi side, as I'm sure you're familiar with, that it's going to make it a little bit easier and better to integrate Wi-Fi with LTE Unlicensed. So is this still, if that comes into play and operators use that, does that reduce the appeal of LTE Unlicensed?
The interesting thing is that the LTE Unlicensed is a separate use, is a somewhat separate use case than the typical Wi-Fi offload. If you're traveling in a car, for example, you're probably not doing Wi-Fi offload that much, because the Wi-Fi offload, even if it's tightly controlled, and there is work going on LTE to try to even make it more tightly controlled and somewhat network based, it still involves you're connected to the 3G, connected to 3G or Wi-Fi, 3G or LTE, and you want to add Wi-Fi to it, so you have to attach that station to that Wi-Fi base station, and that kind of thing, mobility-wise, is a little less, because Wi-Fi wasn't necessarily built for mobility, and thus if you're relatively faster moving, you could be, by the time you associate with the Wi-Fi station and start transmitting, you could be needing to be at the next Wi-Fi station and have to start the process over again. In LA, you will be using the spectrum. You can use the spectrum, not have to. You're going to be registered in the LTE spectrum, and all the control signaling is on the licensed band, and you're just using to put data on spare parts of the unlicensed, because we'll do fairness. That it could you just use a spectrum there and take out the Wi-Fi signal, transmit there in that spectrum when the Wi-Fi isn't using it, and then come back and still have your connection through your macro cell that's LTE based.
Yeah, yeah. So this allows for a much sort of like better integrated network, and then you can have Wi-Fi in addition. And I guess you envisage operators to have both Wi-Fi and LTE unlicensed in the same location as well, right? So that's
Yeah, potentially, yes. Potentially that could be done because it is dependent on how the use cases and how much focus a particular operator is putting on a particular use case. Because, for example, right now, certain operators have complete Wi-Fi networks, and others don't. So there's going to be if you talk to 5 different operators, you're going to have 5 different levels of Wi-Fi support in a particular area, particular range of systems. So this can be used, and thus, if you have fairness, with LA. It's just like another base station, even though it's just like another Wi-Fi terminal and such. So it creates interference to the wireless LAN that they control, but it doesn't necessarily. It's still part of the normal management that they have for that, and thus it doesn't create any more headaches. It still allows the operator to control that their unlicensed LA transmission, in the unlicensed band, control it just like they do with the licensed band as far as quality of service and stuff like this, but still allow, for instance, for example, users that are somewhat, not moving, somewhat stable, to be able to offload most of their traffic or all their traffic to a Wi-Fi hotspot that's nearby, and it could be theoretically in the same area.
Now, at InterDigital, I mean, this is all, LIA. It's a new thing. So we need to wait for standardization to happen before any commercial deployment. But what are your plans in terms of helping the operators? What challenges are you trying to help operators with?
Okay, well, this comes into play. We're coming into play with our current work already. As I said, we have our Smart Access Manager to work with the current UE-based offload to enhance that. We're working with them with the standards for improving that Wi-Fi offload even more in the current release, while also working simultaneously in LLA to make sure their ability to utilize LLA to make it as easy as possible to use their licensed spectrum with the unlicensed to be able to come in and out of it and guarantee quality service. And we'll work with them in our network particular applications. Some of our gateway products or discussions about gateway products and the network side to be able to help them leverage that even more. But a lot of the work will be helping the operators to just expand what they currently have into the unlicensed, and thus be able to have a single point of management of that, and including an enhanced quality of service type of handling of the traffic that goes over this unlicensed spectrum.
Mm-hmm. In closing, when do you think that we will be able to see the first commercial deployments of LAA?
Okay, well, that's a tricky question because there are already publicly announced plans from some companies to already do some trials. That's gonna happen pretty shortly. This is the same kind of thing that happens in the Wi-Fi environment. Whenever a new standard comes out, there's always pre-standard equipment out there to try to enhance things, and we've done in small spectrum blocks, etc., which will probably minimize the effect of Wi-Fi because they'll pick spectrum that's outside of current Wi-Fi usage, and thus they'll be able to test and see how the integration goes without that. But I kind of see that the standardization LA will probably the first couple evolutions will probably happen over the next couple years standards-wise. The first version of this will probably be finished near the end of the year, early next year. Thus, full standards compliant LLA will probably be available, at the end of next year or the year after. as far as that concerned, but pre-standardization versions of that will be available. That other companies have already publicly announced that, so I'm not going to give them any press on that.
Okay, well, Jim, thank you so much for sharing your views with us, and I'm sure you're going to be quite busy over the next few months as all the standardization work is being done. So good luck on that, and again, thank you for sharing your views with us today.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. And so this conversation with Jim Miller at InterDigital was part of the report on LTE unlicensed and its coexistence with Wi-Fi. It is available on the Sense website and the RCR Wireless News website as well. Thank you all.